Today we're looking at a TACAN penetration approach in the A10C at Nellis Air Force Base. Before we start the approach, we will clean the aircraft up and prepare it. So we will safe the weapons, we will set TACAN channel to 12 X-ray, which is Lima Sierra Victor. We will set TACAN to transmit receive, and we will adjust the volume. We'll also repeat the CDU on the right MFD, and we will set the page select dial to position. We do that so that we can repeat the position page on the right MFD, which is going to make things easier for us. We'll also set a course of 209 for the TACAN, and we will set the navigation mode select panel or NIMSIP to TACAN. We're currently in the hold phase of the penetration, heading towards the initial approach fix, which is 21 miles short of the runway. If you look at the chart for the TACAN approach to runway 21 left at Nellis, you will see the hold ends 21 miles from the runway at Cut Me, and that is when we begin the penetration. During the penetration we will reduce engine course speed to 80%, and we will maintain airspeed between 200 and 250 knots indicated, and the speed brake will be below 40%. Now, when we look at the approach chart, there are various descent rates that are indicated. We are interested in the 240 speed descent rate, which is 1,500 feet. Now, I mentioned the penetration diagram before, and that mentioned an airspeed between 200 and 250 knots. Now, that doesn't mean that we can pick any approach speed that we like. The approach speed is going to be based on ground speed, which is why we have ground speed on the right MFD. So here we are about now to begin the descent, so extending speed brakes. We're a little bit offset to the left, as you can tell. The steer point is right on top of runway 21, but we want to be a little bit to the left. Every now and then we'll look down at the CDI, and of course, as you can tell, we're a little bit to the right of the course that we need to follow. If we get onto the correct TACAN course, we will have pretty much a straight in approach to the runway. We will have to do less maneuvering in the final approach. So this part of the approach is really all about staying on about 240 knots ground speed, and we maintain that with speed brake. We do not maintain it with throttle. Throttle remains at 80% core RPM speed. And as you can see, the descent rate is about 1,500 feet per minute. That will actually give us approximately a 1,000 feet per minute final approach. So we're descending now towards the final approach fix, which is 7 miles short of Nellis. About 10 miles from Nellis we will start to get the aircraft into landing configuration, and that means getting the aircraft slowed down below 200 knots with the speed brake, extending landing gear, extending approach flaps, and getting the speed brake down to about 40% extended. As we're flying along here, we're flying along Route 93 towards Las Vegas. Las Vegas is just beyond Nellis. You can see it in the haze. And as we're on final approach, to the right you will see the Las Vegas Motor Speedway. So still cross-checking that ground speed, trying to get it ideally right on 240, but approximate is good enough. So we're just getting lined up here on the TACAN. We're very close to being lined up. Just making small adjustments and getting right onto the centre. So just cross-checking that. And again, look at the vertical speed. It's right on 1,500 feet per minute. So as long as we're above 200 knots indicated, we're perfectly fine on that. You're not picking your indicated airspeed that's defined by ground speed. I'll let that drop off a little bit. But here we are. Now we're on to the actual final approach fix. So on final approach, and at this point we are getting the aircraft straightened out for being on speed. We don't want to get too slow too early. We don't want to spend the entire final approach at 120 knots. That's the minimum that we're looking for. We're looking to avoid airspeed dropping below 120. So typically I'll be looking for about 122 knots. But anywhere between 120 and probably 125 is acceptable. So now descending at 1,000 feet per minute. Touchdown will actually be about 500 feet per minute. I think we're currently extending full flaps. Just managing that airspeed. So we're keeping the velocity vector on the runway threshold and trying to maintain good speed. At this point in the approach, I'm actually flipping the controls around. I'm really using the velocity vector. I'm using the pitch to keep the velocity vector where I want it and the throttle to control airspeed. I do that because pitch is more responsive than throttle inputs. So getting a little bit slow. Just being very careful with on speed. So on speed now, 126. Just making small adjustments. Again, if you look at vertical speed, it's about 1,000 feet per minute. Touchdown will be about 500, which is a little bit more than I'd like. I'd like about less than 250, but doing this by the book, that's pretty much the best you can hope for. So we're approaching Las Vegas Motor Speedway on the right. And as we cross the threshold, we will start to flare the aircraft, just bringing the velocity vector up the runway. I'm a little bit wary of dropping the throttle back to idle because I don't want to lose lift and touch down even harder. And leaving power on full
altitude.
Well, not full, but a significant amount of power on doesn't really make the aircraft float. So I'm quite happy just leaving that little bit of power on. Just trying to line up on centre line, making adjustments all the way down. Looking at that airspeed, 122 knots. Getting it centred. Not overly concerned to be slightly off on speed, but I could do with a little bit more power here. Getting it centred and flaring the aircraft and touchdown. And that is a typical penetration approach using TACAN. Just slowing the aircraft down. It's a good idea to extend speed brake full to help slow you down. A little bit late enabling nose wheel steering. That can come on below 70 knots. And of course we have very conveniently ground speed indicated on the right MFD. Keep it on the centre. Speed brakes retracted. Just slowing it down, trying to get ground speed about 15 knots for this turn. It's quite the hard right turn. want to make the turning control. I think it's a Beta or Bravo that we're turning off on. And at this point cleaning up the aircraft, so raising the flaps, and in a second we'll pop the canopy. So that is a TACAN penetration approach. Now you may be wondering, when would you use this approach? Well, it's when you understand what you're doing, it's a very easy approach to use because it is a straight-in approach. And if you've done the homework on the runway approach, you know exactly what parameters you need to meet on the way down. So it's a very convenient and simple approach to make. And of course, if you find the overhead pattern difficult, this would make for an easy substitute. And it's also an interesting skill set to learn. So hope you found that useful, hope you found that interesting, and as always feel free to like, comment and subscribe.